Hey everyone, CW Music Reviews here. I am CWD and this is going to be a music review of the new Jamiroquai album, Automaton. This is the latest full-length album of acid funk, acid house, disco, overall this hybrid pop project, long-running since the 90s, Jamiroquai. Can't say I've been that familiar with Jamiroquai's back catalog. This is actually the first Jamiroquai record I've ever listened to. But when I was going through my list of anticipated releases as I was curating them for March, I noticed this particular act, Jamiroquai, and decided to do a little bit of research on them and go through some singles. And what I heard pretty much intrigued me. I didn't hear any of the singles off of this new album until I've actually heard the album in full, but their particular myriad and hybrid of sound that they got going on definitely intrigued me, and they definitely had quite a bit of uniqueness to what they were doing. It's not to say that there are no bands out there right now that are fusing disco, funk, synth, and all this other stuff. I mean, Tame Impala did that. And I believe Neon Indian did that as well. But what Jamiroquai do in general seems to be particularly ambitious and to an extent progressive. And that definitely was the case when I looked at the track listing of this album and noticed that not very many songs here go under the 4-minute mark, and a lot of them seem to stay within that 4, 5, or 6 minute range. So I decided to give this a try, and I did. I gave this numerous tries, and what did I think of this thing? I like this thing a lot. This is definitely one of my favorite albums of March. But there are just a couple of tracks here, plus the overly cohesive nature of this album does prevent me from absolutely loving the hell out of it. This album's about 12 tracks in length. It's almost an hour long, about 57 minutes. So it's a pretty decent length, but as I keep listening to this album and returning to it quite often, I find myself not really feeling like it is an hour long. For sure, some tracks here are pretty lengthy, and a couple of them don't really justify the lengths to a certain extent, but the sound and the production that Jamiroquai are going for is unlike most pop projects you're probably going to hear this year. Of course, you have this disco, funk, synth pop, neo-soul hybrid going on throughout this record. The bass sounds groovy and occasionally fuzzed out. The synths are gorgeous. The guitar has quite a bit of swagger to what it is it's doing. The strings that occasionally pop up are pretty bombastic and lush. Just the way these tracks ensnare the listener in this type of danceable sound and danceable atmosphere is pretty breathtaking. Take the opening track, Shake It On. If this track don't get you grooving, you just have no sense of pleasure whatsoever. Or the track Hot Property. The bass on this thing is goddamn catchy, and the stuttering vocal refrain is pretty catchy as well. She's hot property, my baby's hot, 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 hot property. Just the sheer straightforward nature of this album, along with occasionally the progression to what it is it's doing, definitely is a plus. I just wish that some of the tracks here switched it up a little more, or did something more than just the basic standard of a pop song or whatever. With that in mind, my two least favorite tracks are Something About You and Nights Out in the Jungle. The former of which has a mid-paced groove to it. It's decent, but I don't really feel like it justifies it being as long as it is. There just isn't that much variation to this track. Plus the vocals on this track feel a little campy for its own good. Add to that, it's got some ridiculous lyrics on it, and the one that always sticks out to me is You're Like Candy Crush, 2 hits and I'm addicted to you. And Nights Out in the Jungle, there's a nice catchy bass groove to it. I like that a lot. But it doesn't really grab my attention until it reaches the halfway point where there's all these guitar solo stuff going on. What I really was kind of disappointed with about this album is that more tracks weren't like the title track, Automaton. It has a nice mechanical edge to it that is pretty fantastic, with all these like glitch shots going on and all these really mechanical type vocoder that is implemented all throughout the track. And there's legitimate progression to it, and I dig that quite a bit. Along with tracks like Dr. Buzz and Carla, which is the closing track to this album, and I do like how climactic that is. Tracks like We Can Do It and Vitamin has also, once again, a really driving groove to it that really does command my attention. That's pretty much a lot of these tracks here. Even tracks like Cloud 9 and Summer Girl, which are more poppy but still particularly well fleshed out. There's just something about what Jamiroquai does on this album with their kind of spacey, kind of glitchy and occasionally mechanical funk, neo-soul, disco thing that really does have me returning to this quite often, and I'm definitely going to be looking forward to what these guys are going to be releasing after this one. Jamiroquai, after 5 or 6 years of not having new material to drop, had a chance to make fans like me that are not exactly that familiar with their work, or regaining the trust of veteran fans, and they've succeeded from what I can hear. If you're a fan of this funky neo-soul, disco, synth-pop, house music type thing, then you're definitely going to want to check this out, because it's definitely within that alley of uniqueness. This album is a plus 2.2 and a plus 3. I just wish that it was more fulfilling with some of the tracks here, but regardless, I do like a bulk of the album a lot. But if you give this album a listen, what you think of it? Did you like this album? Did you dislike this album? What was your reasoning for that? And what should I consider listening to and reviewing next? This is CWD Music Reviews here, signing off.